Welcome to the Gold Standard here on the 440 Sports Network, a part of Lower Broad Hockey, of course, on Substack. My name is Braden Gall. You can get to me still. I guess it's Twitter, or maybe it's changed. I don't know. I don't care. At Braden Gall. Good morning, Emma Lingen and Michael Gallagher. How are we this fine morning? Is there anything happening in Nashville Predators land?
Pretty quiet week.
So, obviously, much to discuss today on the show. We'll get into each of the contracts that Barry Trotz decided to hand out. I believe it was 176.9. Don't forget about that 0.9 million. $176 million worth of contracts over 28 years. Extensions and free agents, clearly giving this franchise a distinct direction. We'll get into the big picture ideas behind all of that strategy. We'll get into the granular details of each of the contracts, what this could actually do to the starting lineup. And oh, by the way, there was an NHL draft over the weekend in Vegas where they got 8 new players, and he had some strategy there. I know you guys had a chance to kind of chat with some of those guys for the first time at Dev Camp. They're going to have more practice. Obviously, we're recording this live on Wednesday, and if you're in the YouTube comment section and you have questions, please jump in there and ask those. And, of course, if you're on Facebook or Twitter, give us a share. Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion over at Lower Broad Hockey, so please come join the community. Lower Broad Hockey on Substack. You can, of course, also follow it on Twitter and Instagram, Lower Broad Pucks. So a lot of stuff to get to. The chat has been a ton of fun to watch you guys react and interact and just so much stuff going on in there. So if you want to be a part of that community, we'd love to have you. But come on over to the website, Lower Broad Hockey. Gold Standard will always will stay free for you folks here each and every Wednesday. At least that's for now. For now, it'll be Wednesday. We'll see what the plan moves forward, but we'll keep you posted on the timing. All right, Emma, you were at the Sphere. What was the Sphere like? I guess we'll start there. You were at the draft. We'll get back to, obviously, we got a lot of stuff to discuss today, but how was the draft? How was Vegas? What was that like?
The Sphere lives up to the hype, I've got to say. It was very cool. Pretty trippy. I will say it was probably a better experience for fans in attendance, like in the seating area, because obviously it's designed to be like a music venue, right? So the acoustics, for those of us who were sitting on the floor, like I was, it kind of just felt like you were sitting in the front row of an IMAX movie the entire time, because like your head is just up, like you have to look, because the screen takes up the entire thing. So like to see the top 5 picks, you had to look like directly above you. And it was, I think the acoustics were better in the seating. I think they have like speakers embedded in the seating area. Yep. So that was probably better. Although I will say, given how loud that trade alert goal horn was down on the floor, I can only imagine how loud it was in the seats. Like there was a guy at the New Jersey table who literally fell out of his chair the first time one of those like trade alerts came up. It was quite loud.
Was he okay? Did they rush the staff out there to take care of him?
No, he was good. He was good. I mean, I am very glad I received a warning ahead of time that like, hey, I don't know what they're going to do, but I think they're going to do something for a trade alert. And they likened it to the Columbus Cannon, to which I said, all right, understood, because I'm a very jumpy person and I do not do well with no warning. So, but no, it was great. It was a great experience. Definitely lived up to the hype.
Well, and I'll ask you some of your first impressions on some of the draft picks a little bit later on in the show. All right, here's the most important question. If hypothetically you were going to a concert at the Sphere, where would you sit? Would you sit in the back rows? Would you sit up close? Where would you sit if you're going to a concert? For everyone who might be wanting to go to the Sphere for a show.
I don't know. I think I could tell you where I would not sit, but I don't think it's an option if you go for a concert. Don't sit on the floor. It's not that pleasant of an experience. But I think the way it's laid out, the way it's designed is so like there isn't a bad seat in that place. Yeah. I think like really you could, because even the lower seats, like the front seats kind of like jut out a little bit. So it's, I don't know. It's cool. I don't think there's a bad seat in there.
All right. So, Mike, I'm going to start with you, and I want to start big picture here because we'll get into the details of each of these contracts and the value of each of these contracts, but we've got to kind of start holistically because the news on Juuse Saros comes out on Friday that he's going to be the goaltender for and I might have undervalued the total number of the the contracts. It might be 29. I might have taken a year off of Saros's contract. It might be 29 years and like $182 million that Barry Trotz spent over the weekend. But the news and the whole entire offseason starts with the Friday contract leak of an extension. He is going to be the Nashville Predators goaltender for the next 9 seasons. And there's certainly some inflation baked into the contract. We'll get to the contract in a second. He then goes and spends a ton of money on a lot of veteran pieces. This is now the second oldest team in the NHL behind I guess all 31 or behind only the Penguins, one of the two. They add 2 top line wingers in Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessalt. They add a top line defenseman in Brady Skjei. They bring back Alex Carrier. They signed Scott Wedgewood to be the backup. So we'll get to all the details of all of that coming up. But I want to step back from the details and just ask about this strategy. Juuse and Forsberg aren't getting any younger. You sign Juuse Saros to an extension. You are telling the fans, and I don't like all the cliches that float around. They're going for it. They're all in. Like we can do better than that. The question is spending big to try to win now with the window that we have for some of these veteran pieces. Again, Juuse and Forsberg, namely. Ryan O'Reilly's probably on that list as well. Is this the right move, considering he didn't give up any assets, future assets, really, to get any of this stuff? How do you guys feel about the strategy after telling us, having a vibe that maybe he didn't want to spend on a big name contract, and then he doesn't do it once, he does it 4 times?
Yeah, I think it kind of shows that, we talked about, are they in a rebuild? Are they not? Are they a playoff team? Are they not? I think the fact that they overachieved, and we talked about the rebuild kind of being ahead of schedule. I think how competitive the Vancouver series was. I think, in my opinion, what that showed Trotz was he has a team that can compete right now that maybe is a couple pieces away from possibly being a cup contender. And I hesitate to throw that out there because I don't think this team, even with adding all the pieces they added, is a true cup contender. I think they could be, but as of right now, I don't think they are. But I think in Barry Trotz's mind, like, you're right, he's sitting there, he's looking at Forsberg's about to be 30, Yossi's in his 30s, Saros coming up on 30. Like, the core guys that he has locked up to big money, long-term deals, they're not getting any younger. So, yeah, you can take the next 2-3 years or so for however long you want to play it out and do the rebuild. But by that time, you've wasted, half of Forsberg's contract, most of Roman Yossi's contract, the beginning of Juuse Saros' extension. And I think that's really kind of what we're looking at. Barry Trotz looked at his roster, and he decided the rebuild isn't worth kind of wasting the prime years of Forsberg, Juuse, and Saros. And that's why you go out, and that's why you get a Steven Stamkos. That's why you get a Jonathan Marchessalt. That's why you go out and you get a Brady Skjei and even Scott Wedgewood. Like, we talk about Kevin Lankinen and how good he was. Scott Wedgewood, I think, was arguably one of the best backup goalies on the market. They're in win now mode, I think. And I know fans hate that. And there was a bunch of people on my mentions, and I'm sure, and everybody else's mentions that was talking about this team, kind of saying like, oh, this was a David Poile move, load up and try to make another run at the playoffs and stuff. And like, I understand that and the frustration's there, but I feel like these were bolder than moves David Poile would have made. Going out and getting Steven Stamkos, who's arguably the best player in Tampa Bay Lightning history. Going out and getting Jonathan Marchessalt, who had an incredible playoff run 2 years ago and is a cup winner. You're bringing guys that have won a cup. And we saw kind of what that leadership did for this group heading down the stretch in the season. Like, that 18-game point streak does not happen if they do not have guys like O'Reilly and Nyquist and Shen and guys that have been on teams that have won and have produced and stuff like that. Like, that doesn't happen without those kind of players. So I think this was Barry Trotz signaling to the fans, like, bear with me, I have a plan, but the plan is absolutely to compete and it's not to rebuild.
Yeah, and I think, You mentioned fans maybe being upset or getting a little twitchy at, some of the term and some of the numbers that he's handing out. To that, I just say, well, what do you want? Because you've been begging for this team to go out and spend big and get these big pieces and, make a serious run and make it out of the first round of the playoffs for once. So he went out and he did that. So if you're upset about it, then what do you want?
The knock on Poile was he never went out and acquired that top line franchise changing player. I mean, hello, you just signed fucking Steven Stamkos. It doesn't get any more big name than that. I mean, Jonathan Marchessalt. Yeah, Jonathan Marchessalt is good. If he's we can talk about where these guys are going to play, but if Marchessault is on your second line and he's playing with Luke Evangelista and whoever, like that's one hell of a second line. That would be a top line on a lot of other teams. So, I mean, Barry Trotz is going out and he's doing the bold moves that fans were wanting Poile to do the last 3 years of his tenure.
So first of all, I have not seen much negative reaction from fans. I think most fans have responded with, all right, let's go. Like, we're in. And this is sports. You have no idea if it's going to work. And I think I've got a more pointed question about that here in a second. But I have not seen the reaction. Most everybody, especially at Lower Broad Hockey Substack app, go check it out. Most everybody over there is super jacked up on Mountain Dew. Like everyone's ready to go, excited about it. And the facts are whether
I'll screenshot some of my mentions and send them to you because I got a lot of the negativity.
Well, again,
I did too.
You got so I see the shit you take on Twitter. It's different than the shit Michael takes on Twitter, but they're both shit. You guys got to stop using the mentions on Twitter and come over to Lower Broad and hang out with us where everyone gets along and everyone's in chat having fun. It's like what Twitter used to be before all the Nazi racists showed up. So, they're bad people on Twitter, guys. That's not a new thing. But I've seen mostly positive reaction to all of this because this is an objective fact, in my opinion. You guys can tell me if you think I'm wrong. This is the most talented offensive roster on paper that the Nashville Predators have ever had. It's the most talented top six that this franchise has ever had. That doesn't mean it's going to work. That doesn't mean they're going to win anything, but it is the best and most talented goal-scoring top six offensive team and roster they've ever had. I don't think that's a subjective take. I think that's an objective fact. So whether you are excited about it or concerned about the term, all valid feelings, the facts are that he has put the most talented roster together maybe ever in franchise history. That's sort of an objective fact, unless you guys disagree with that. I don't know. I assume you guys sort of agree with that.
I mean, it's the first time in franchise history that a number one overall pick has played for this team in Steven Stamkos. Like, that's the highest or the closest to that before was David Legwan, who was number 2 overall. So, like, I think does he really count as a number 2 overall pick? No. No comment. But I think that
Patrick Laine is a number 2 overall pick.
Yeah. Well, I think what's important here, and I know a lot of fans probably won't agree, or they'll agree, but say like that's not what we care about. Is the message that this sends is like he went out, Barry Trotz went out, he took those big swings, he went and got the best available players. Like, it wasn't just about like, all right, let's be, see what we can get and not spend too much money. Like, it was a very aggressive approach, and he went and got the best available guys. Yes, they're all in their 30s, but they're and people are concerned about that. But it's like, look, they're all these guys are going to give you the best chance to win right now. And as you mentioned before, Braden, I don't want to gloss over that because I think this is really important, that he did it all without sacrificing any of their future. He did not give up any draft capital. He didn't give up any key prospects. He actually brought in a big prospect in Andrew Gibson with that trade before the draft. So I think that to me is what makes this all I don't think it's an overspend on any of these guys. And I don't think that it's a mistake, regardless of what happens. Like you said, even if it doesn't work out, they don't win a cup. I think it sends the message, and it busts that window of contention wide open right now.
Buy more season tickets. Buy more season tickets is the message it sends.
It opens up the window now, but that window doesn't get truncated at the end now. Like, it's going to stay open for longer because you haven't sacrificed any of your future pieces.
And what it also does too is it helps out 2 areas you really kind of struggled in last year. Steven Stamkos is going to, I don't want to say single-handedly save the power play, but he is going to really do a lot of work with the power play. I mean, since his rookie year in 2008, he's 2nd in power play goals and 3rd in power play points. I mean, we're talking about the equivalent of the only guy that has similar numbers since Stamkos broke into the league is Alex Ovechkin in a lot of these goal scoring, point producing categories. So Stamkos is really going to help the power play. The Predators' single season record for power play goals is 16. Stamkos has had more than that in 5 of his 16 seasons, and he's usually in that 14 to 18 range. So he's going to help out a weakness. I mean, they were 16th in the league last year in power play, but it really took them the entire season to get up there. They were in the bottom of the league most of the year. So he's going to help with the power play. And you go out and you get a guy like Jonathan Marchessalt, he has that clutch factor, and that's really what the Predators struggled with. We talked about it in the Vancouver series. Like, we were like, this is when Philip Forsberg needs to take over games, score goals, all that stuff, and it didn't happen. Marchessalt is going to be that guy that delivers in the clutch moments, because that's what he's done. He has 32 game-winning goals just under 7 seasons. For context, Roman Josi has 34 in 13 seasons. So Jonathan Marchessalt is going to be one of those guys that you're going to look to. You're probably going to see him on the ice, the final change. You're going to see him on the ice in the last minute when you're down, when there's an extra attacker, all that stuff, because he's the guy who proved with Vegas that he can come in and deliver big, timely goals when you need him to. And those are, having a clutch player like that and having someone like a power play ace up your sleeve, those are two things that this team really, really could have used last year. And now you have that going into next year.
So Max says masterclass by Trotz. There's some positivity right there immediately from the comment section. And I believe Max, of course, is in the chat over there at Lower Broad Hockey. So good to see you. Jeff says being able to play on a line with Stamkos will be the biggest development help for Luke Evangelista. We'll get to the lineups as well, because there is one, I'm not going to lie. Like, I don't get truly excited about sports stuff. Like, oh, I can't wait to see this. But there is one potential lineup that is absolutely tantalizing to me. I don't know if it's going to work, but we'll get to that in a second. So, not to be devil's advocate and be sort of just asking the tougher question here, but the ultimate thing is, and Michael, you said it, they overachieved a little bit. They were in playoff contention. And statistically, they maximized almost everything. Year number 2 for a coach's system generally is going to be tougher. Teams have tape on you. They adjust. That's what's going to happen to Andrew Brunette. You maxed out Gus Nyquist. You maxed out Philip Forsberg. You maxed out, like, a lot of the players had career years. And so asking them to replicate that is going to be just statistically difficult to do. So ultimately the question I have is, the tough question here is, was that, I don't want to say like fake, but did it give Barry Trotz false confidence that this team could be a cup contender because they did overachieve? Was it just sort of like the magic of year one and sort of it all working and coming together and the young players developing and the old players having career years? And then they come back down to earth and these veterans are just they're very good, obviously. Again, how many total 40-goal seasons have the Nashville Predators have as a franchise? Do you guys know off the top of your head? I'm sure you do. 3. They had 3.
2 of them are Forsbergs.
They have 3 on the roster from last year right now. Marchessalt and Stamkos and Forsberg all had 40 last year. Doesn't mean they're going to repeat it. But the question is do you get it? Any thought to a false sense of confidence by last season because of the overachievement? I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm just asking the question.
I don't think so, because I think, to your point, I think it shows a very realistic approach and realistic view of last season and being like, hey, this was great, but let's be realistic and understand that Gus Nyquist is probably not going to have another career year at age 34, 35. And we can't just go run it back and, expect to be even better this year just because everyone's a year older, a year wiser. So I think that by bringing in the Marchessalts, the Stamkoses, the Skjeis, that way you're not relying so heavily on those guys from last year to repeat exactly what they did. Of course, you would like them to, but like, it doesn't. This team, in kind of, you mentioned this earlier, but this was a one-line team. It was Forsberg, Nyquist, O'Reilly, and then everyone else. And now you just immediately gave this team so much more depth at the forward position. And so I think it takes some of that pressure off of those top performers from last year. Not saying that they necessarily feel pressure, but I mean, sure, in terms of, if you want this team to go anywhere and to get out of the first round of the playoffs, you need more than 3 guys to be doing all of your scoring. And so this provides that.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't count on another 75-point season from Nyquist, but I think kind of, I guess, the opposite of what you're talking about. I think last year showed, like, we knew Forsberg was a really good player. Now he's got a head coach that can kind of match his skill as a player, and we think he's probably going to be, 35, 40 goals, 80-point player going forward. Like, Roman Josi, we knew he was an 85-point defenseman. We already knew that. Ryan O'Reilly, 26 goals, 69 points. I think that may have been overachieving a little bit, but I think that's pretty on par for what Ryan O'Reilly you can expect from him. Tommy Novak only had 45 points and he only played 71 games. If he plays a full season, he's probably in that 55-point range. And we talked about, there was a 2-week stretch where he did literally nothing. And then after his injury, and then he came back and he kind of found his rhythm. But if he doesn't go 2 weeks and then the time he missed with injury, like he's probably close to 50, 55, 60 points, somewhere in that range. I think you can expect more than 39 points out of Luke Evangelista, especially playing in the top 6 if he is playing with Stamkos and Marchessalt. I mean, I think there's players that you expect to regress a little bit, but there's also players like Novak and Evangelista, maybe you throw Sissons in there, that you kind of expect a little bit more out of this year. So I don't think last year was, giving them false hope. I think that's kind of what you can expect, because the players that overachieved will regress, but the players that that kind of underachieved a little bit, I think they'll probably take a little step forward this year.
So actual expectations. And again, Jeff says Trotz bought it, literally. And then he says, who is your second line center? Novak. We'll get to the lineup. We'll get to those contracts in the lineup, because I do think there's some fascinating combinations to discuss. So actual expectations. If you look at Vegas books, they sort of are in that, as high as 7 or 8 or 9 in cup odds, sort of the low teens as well, 10, 11, 12, 13. Like, again, give or take your book and what day. Vegas is there to provide value and to get you to bet on things. So it just sort of it's just worth noting. It doesn't mean that it means anything. I want to know what your personal expectations are. I think this is now a 2 seed in the division. That's what I would set for this franchise this year. They should go from 4th place and a wild card team to a 2 seed and home ice advantage in the first round. That is sort of where I would set expectations. I don't think they are the division favorite, nor should they be. But my opinion is now you should be competing for that 2 seed pretty much most of the season. And if you do not finish as a 2 seed, then I could argue the spending spree was they didn't maximize it, at least in this year. But I would say 2 seed is where this team should be now. If you're looking on paper, Dallas is much, much older. Colorado's still very good. You got Winnipeg. I mean, I don't know where you guys would put them in the division relative to the rest of the Western Conference, but I that's what my expectations are. Where do you have this team now slotted in your mind from an expectation standpoint?
I would say I have them. I think they're definitely better than Winnipeg. I would put them right there in the conversation with Dallas and Colorado. I mean, we want to talk about all the great moves that Barry Trotz made. Yes, this team is much better on paper, but they still have to play the games. And also, Dallas still has a damn good team. Colorado still has a damn good team. I mean, we're talking about 2 teams that have dominated this division the last 2 or 3 years, really built up rosters that are sustainable to continue winning and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's easy to get lost in the hype, like, oh, they added Stamkos, they added Marchessalt, Brady Skjei, they re-signed Saros, Carrier, all this stuff. It's easy to get lost in all the big moves that they did and all the money they spent and put them in that cup contender category. But also, they play in a really tough division that's top heavy. I mean, Dallas and Colorado are 2, not just in the Central Division, but 2 of the top teams in the league. So I would put them in that conversation for sure. But I'm more of in a wait and see mode. I think right now on paper, they're in in the same league. But I want to see how some of these games play out, because we talked about 2 years ago when they brought in Nito Niederreiter and all this stuff, and we were talking about how this was the greatest offseason that Poiles had in a while and all this stuff, and then they ended up fire sale at the trade deadline. So
Barry Trotz says, "Hold my beer."
Yeah, I mean we've seen expectations not be met here before, so I think they're definitely there. But again, I think winning the division isn't out of the question for him. I think, maybe being a 2 seed, not out of the question. Potentially making a run to the conference final, not out of the question. Whereas, 3 days ago, we weren't even thinking about this stuff. We were thinking about, they're probably going to be a playoff team. They might win a playoff series if they get another scorer. And Barry Trotz definitely has changed the narrative about the Predators.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you definitely got to aim higher than just get into the playoffs and see what happens. Like, I think that, yeah, a 2 seed is reasonable, I think. But again, to Mike's point, I am excited now, with the schedule coming out yesterday. I'm excited about, seeing this team play against Dallas and against Colorado and seeing, against Edmonton in October, like seeing
that's still scary.
Yeah, but like I think it'll be a good kind of yardstick to see how much better is this team. Like, yes, obviously they're miles better on paper, but you don't play the game on paper. So I want to see like how they really match up. Like, understand, like Mike said, Dallas, Colorado, still, I'm not saying like, oh yeah, they're going to blow Dallas and Colorado out of the water. I don't think they are, but I think they will be right in there in the mix with those teams.
Yeah. It's so funny. Like they last year's team, one line team, Saros didn't play his best season. They overachieved, new system, first year coach. They get in there, and the reward is a Vancouver team in which they sort of like matched up well experience wise, but maybe didn't match up well in other areas. And now the expectations are, and I think it's fair, Michael, you're saying like these are the three at the top of the division. Emma, you kind of agree with that. I think that's right. I think personally, again, we can pick which one. I would put Colorado at first, but like to beat one of them in the standings and to lose to the other, I think is a fair way to look at it, that these three are the top contenders. And so all of it just in my head, that's just popped into my head, like all this spending, all this development to make them better, which they are going to be. And now expectations do add pressure to everybody involved. They are now expected to compete for a 2 seed and a home playoff series. And what's your reward if you get to that 2 seed? You get a home playoff series against either Dallas or Colorado, probably in the first round. Like, congratulations. So, but I don't think the expectations should be win the division and win the cup. I think fans need to, like, I think they need to pump the brakes on that level. But to put them up there, again, that's why I would say 2 seed. If you go to a 1 seed and you win the division, you overachieved. Congratulations. If you underachieve slightly, I think 3 seed is fine. And if you kind of accomplish your goals based on what they've got on paper, I think that's where I'd put them as a 2 seed. All right. If you want to dive in, we'll have lots more analysis, of course, of all these different contracts. I know we'll have some videos and we'll have a lot of stuff coming. I've got a lot of these contracts. I got access to sort of a proprietary NHL valuation chart, for lack of a better term. And I'm going to sort of work through a lot of details. You need to read it, though. It doesn't translate well to a talking medium. So I'll give you more details. Lower Broad Hockey, of course, is the website over on Substack. But I want to start with Saros because I think it's the most complicated and difficult one to talk about. I think on paper, every other contract in a vacuum is quite a good deal in general. I think if you look at all the different contracts individually, really good deal for Marchessalt. I'm actually the most excited about Brady Skjei. Maybe that puts me in the minority. Steven Stamkos, very, pretty good contract value-wise. Carrier, pretty good contract for a top 4 defenseman if that's where he's going to play contract-wise. Wedgewood, you mentioned, already a pretty good contract. We can go each one here, but I'm going to start with Saros because I think this is the one that I feel like is overvalued from if you look at the NHL and you look at how much they're going to have invested in their goaltending for a very long period of time, this is the only one that sort of you kind of go, he overpaid. And if he overpaid for Saros because he's a hometown guy and he wants him to retire a Predator, like that's fine. That's I don't have a problem with that. But I think that certainly was baked into it because you're going to have almost $10 million invested in 2 goaltenders, probably for the foreseeable future, neither of which right now is Yaroslav Askarov. But he's a Vezina caliber goaltender that he's now in your net for the next decade. It's hard to, I see both sides of it, and I think it's great to have a great goaltender. That's where I'll start the conversation, and you guys can go from there because I do think the term was a lot, I think, for this contract.
Well, I'm going to disagree because I've been on Team Saros this whole time. So I think if you were expecting, and I don't mean you, I mean anyone was expecting Saros to get signed for less than 8 years, like that's pretty unreasonable, just given with where he is, and how he's valued. Again, yes, coming off statistically his worst season, even at his worst, he finished 5th in the Vezina voting. Like that's pretty damn good if that's your worst. So I think that yes, he hasn't won a Vezina, he hasn't won a playoff series, but that's all, like that's not entirely his fault. And so I think that I like it. I like they got it under $8 million a year, which again, I think that's your hometown discount right there. I know it's just under $8 million.
The 0.26.
Hey, it still counts. Okay.
No, I agree.
It still counts. So I think that, he could have gotten more. Like, I think he really could have. And I know people don't like the term, oh, he's going to be old, whatever. I just think that you have to look at, again, what's going to give this team the best chance to win right now and in the future.
I'm with you on that one.
So I like it.
To me, it's like I would have given him 8.5 for like 6 years. I would have overpaid and then gotten some term off the deal. But that's just me. So
well, I think it boils down to what you have in Saros. He's a proven commodity. Askarov has a ton of potential, but and I hate going back to this because I feel like it's just kind of nitpicking. But Barry Trotz, Juuse Saros is a Barry Trotz kind of goalie. No nonsense, doesn't really talk a lot. You're not going to see him do anything stupid online on TMZ. Not that you're going to see Askarov doing any of that, but Saros is a safe bet because he does everything the right way. Askarov has the big personality. He kind of, he's very flashy. He's a hell of a player, but there's also the stuff that comes with the attention he brings when he's bench pressing a goal after a shutout and stuff like that. So,
are we making too much of that though? Like if you're good, you're good. If you're bad, you're bad. Are we making too much of the personality stuff? I feel like we are.
I mean, if it was, then people wouldn't be talking about PK Subban and some of those other guys the way they do.
I think that one's laced. I think that one's laced with a whole other layer of conversation.
People will make what they want of it, but my ultimate point is what you're getting in Juuse Saros, and Barry Trotz feels comfortable with Saros because to him, Juuse Saros is basically an extension of Pecorine. And I know we talked about last year. It took him a lot. He's usually a slow starter. It took him a lot longer to pick things up. But I feel like after the All-Star break, when they went on their point streak and until the end of the season, that was really, I think that's the kind of play we can expect from the Predators going forward, because I feel like that's when the whole team kind of gelled and everyone found their sweet spot. From that moment on, Saros, I know we talked about how bad his save percentage and his goals against average were compared to what his average has been, throughout his season. From the All-Star game on, .916 save percentage, 2.51 goals against average. I think that's the kind of performance you can expect from Saros going forward, because once he found his groove in Andrew Burnett's system and everything was vastly different for him for the first half of the season, if he plays that way, I think that contract is going to be a steal. Yeah, I don't like being married to a goaltender basically for 9 years because he's got one more year left in his deal than the 8-year extension. But if you get that kind of play out of Saros for at least 5 or 6 of those years, and then you get, above average to good goaltending for the rest of that contract, I think it's great. And the fact that you got him under $8 million a year, I don't know exactly what Saros was asking for, but I think he could have at least got 8.25 to $8.5 million, maybe on a 6 or 7 year deal if had he gone to free agency. But I mean, I think it's a good contract. You get him under $8 million a year. You have an all-star goalie who, like Emma said, even in his down year, he was still 5th in the Vezina voting. I will take that all day long.
So I'm gonna put more of this into an actual article, but according to some hockey ops people, the way that they evaluate the goaltending position is in the current cap, $7.5 million should be allocated on average to your goaltending starter and backup. In the new cap, which goes up to $92 million next season, which is when Saros is still under it for just $5 million next year. $7.9 million is what what NHL teams project as sort of your baseline average of what you should be invested in with your goalie 1 and goalie 2. The Preds are over that for 9 years, for 8 years. So they are over invested based on what the average team in the league invests in their goaltender. Saros is above average. So, and I think there's value. I think it's okay. I think self-awareness is key here. I think it is okay to say we are going to be overinvested in our cap relative to the rest of our roster in our goaltending because we love Juuse Saros. Nashville loves Juuse Saros. He's very, very good at hockey, most importantly. But he means something to the community. He matters the way Pecorine mattered to the city and to the fans. And I'm okay with that. I think it's fine I just think you need to say that that's baked into the contract. And who knows what it's going to be like when he's 37, 38, and 39 on the contract. He is going to be old in the last few years of the deal, and there's no chance that it's going to be worth the money those few years. But in the first 4, in this window we're talking about with Josi and Forsberg and O'Reilly and Marchessalt at 34, Marchessalt and Stamkos at 34, he is going to be at his best in this first wave of this first window. And so I have no problem investing in the short term, but I think we do need to be self-aware about that on average, this is going to be a devaluation of the cap in general for every year of the contract, but certainly the back few years if he's not able to produce at 38 years old, and who could blame him? Although we just watched a goaltender in Florida, kind of come back and surge and, play his best at the last minute and win a cup off of it. So
the way I look at the Saros contract, and I know it's not exactly a a perfect comparison. But if you sign Connor Hellebuck to that deal, would you still consider it a good deal? If you sign Jake Ottinger to that deal, would you still consider it a good deal? Saros is right. Saros is right there on the same level with those guys.
No, I agree. How old is Hellebuck right now? Is he the same age? I don't have that in front of me.
I think he's 32.
Yeah, I would like it less.
31 maybe.
It is a great contract for Juuse Saros and the Nashville Predators, and specifically in the first 5 years of the deal. I think it's
31.
I think it's a major question about whether it's a good contract in the last 3 years of the deal. But that's what Barry Trotz is paying for. That's for all of these guys. He's paying for. We don't know what Brady Skjei is going to be at 36 and 37 years old. Like we don't know what any of these guys are going to be when they're 38, but we know what they are now. And in the next 3 or 4 years, this is why this is the first wave. I don't like using windows, although windows are more appropriate in hockey than other sports because the contracts are all guaranteed. And so I think this is absolutely there's a 3 to 4 year window here with the current veterans that they are clearly saying, look, we're going to try to win here. Josh asked the question, will they continue to ride Saros? Look, Josh, you are asking a question that we have been asking of this franchise for years, and I don't know if there's an answer, but will they continue to ride Saros, or will they protect their investment some and reduce the workload a bit? I guess that's where we can talk Scott Wedgewood. They had a pretty good backup in Kevin Lankinen, but we have been asking this of this franchise for years. When are you going to back off 64, 67, 62 starts where he's leading the league in saves and minutes and shot attempts and games played? Like don't they have to back off at some point, or is this just the same old question? just deja vu all over again.
I don't know. I really like the Wedgewood signing because first of all, you weren't going to get Lankinen for less than $2 million a year like you did for Wedgewood, and nor should you. That's fine. But I think Wedgewood, if you look at his last year with Dallas, Ottinger missed almost a month with that groin injury, and Wedgewood had like 11 starts in a row. I think he went like 6-3-2 during that time. I mean, like he has the ability to kind of step in and fill that, that void there if you need him to. He's not one of those guys. Like I said this when they signed him, I'm like, if there was anyone else, like if there was anyone other than Kevin Lankinen that I would want backing up Juuse Saros, Scott Wedgewood, I think, is a fantastic addition to this team, and you get him at a good price, and you get him for 2 years. So I like it.
Yeah, I mean, he did have that months-long run as kind of the de facto starter while Ottinger was out. He had 28 starts last year, 18 the year before. And what I also like, too, is he spent the last 2 years in the Central Division. He's familiar with the teams you're going to have to play for. I think 12 of his starts last year came against Central Division teams. I know you don't want to, put a lot of stock in records, but 16-7-5, that's a pretty decent record. A 2.8 goals against average. The save percentage was a little concerning, 899, but also he was facing really good teams. He's facing good competition, just like we talked about with Kevin Lankinen, where it seemed like most of his starts came against playoff teams on the road. But I think Wedgewood was probably, I would say he's probably the best backup goaltender they could have got. I was leaning a little bit towards Casey DeSmith when free agency started, but I saw a lot of guys talking about how they feel like Wedgewood was a better kind of backup plan than Casey DeSmith was. So I mean, he's got the experience as a starter. If you need him to take a week or two where your Saros is out or injured or whatever, he's got the experience against the Central Division. So I think he was a great signing. And if you're going to lose someone the caliber of Kevin Lankinen, I mean, Wedgewood's as good as it gets. Finding a replacement for him.
So he, over his last 3 years, he started 78 games. So that's 26 starts per season with a .908 save percentage, 294 goals against, 38, 30, and 14 in that span. So if you just take his last 3 years and you just say, okay, on average, 26 starts over the last 3 years, that would be 56 for Juuse Saros. That would be protecting your investment and reducing his workload. And those numbers I just gave you from a performance standpoint aren't all that far off from what Saros was last year. So the point is, for $1.5 million a year for 2 years, if you get 26 starts per year over the next 2 years with a .908 save percentage and a 294 goals against, I think that's an incredible investment, especially if the guy starting the other 56 games is Juuse Saros. And again, I want to be very clear about my opinion on the contract. Like, I am absolutely on board with going for it now and paying Saros to make sure you are set at goaltender for the long period of time. We can Western Conference Finals, Stanley Cup Final, Division Championship, whatever comes in the next 4 or 5 years, that's the point of paying the contract. We can worry about 2031 when it gets here. We can worry about 2030 when it gets here. And in theory, Saros could actually be a very tradable asset in 5 years, even with this contract. Hey, he's got 3 years left, $7.5 million. Like that's not a crazy contract to move for a veteran goaltender for a team that might be desperate for a veteran goaltender. So I want to make sure, because Jeff says the same thing. Like, and I want to reiterate that I'm not concerned about 7-8 years from now if we can go to the Western Conference Final or a finals in the next 3 years. It's worth it. What have we done the last 5 years? Let's go. I'm not concerned, he says. So I do want to make sure that I agree with that. Like this 5 years, and Wedgewood's excellent signing. But again, it'll be good next year. It's still only like a grand total of like $6.5 million invested in your goaltending. So that's still a value proposition relative to cap hit. It's the following year that it kicks up, and then who knows what'll happen after that. Maybe a Skarov. I guess we could wait on getting into that unless you want to talk about it now. He's, Barry Trotz fielded phone calls basically the entire draft weekend on him. I assume he's fielding phone calls literally every day from now until something happens with Yaroslav Askarov, whatever that may be. But now they have flexibility and options. They drafted a goaltender as well. He can sit in Milwaukee and build and grow and develop another year. I'm working on getting to some of the guys that run the Preds goalie department, because I'm fascinated by developing skills. And are they going to let him sit for a year in Milwaukee and then let him sit for 2 years in Nashville the way Juuse Saros did? That's a fantastic option if that's what you can do with your goaltending situation.
Agreed.
All right.
Nothing to add. No notes.
No notes. Okay, well, let's go to the forward contracts here. Stamkos, 4 for 80 or 4 for 8. That'd be a lot of money. Yeah. $8 million a year for 4 years, $32 million. Real quickly, ultimately, and I guess I'll add Marchessalt into this as well. 5 years, $5.5 million. That's an undervalue. If he's a top line winger, you've got him. That is way below the cap valuation, market value for a number one winger. Stamkos at $8 million is about where you would pay a top line winger. They are both 34 years old. They both scored 40 goals last year. I don't think you could expect that from Marchessalt. I don't think, but I still think he's going to score a bunch of goals. They injected 100 goals into the offense, which has never been done before by this team. What do you make of the two contracts? And I guess my ultimate question is, can one of them play center? Because I don't want to break up the first line. I still think that's where you maximize Nyquist in theory. And if you could figure out a way, and we had somebody in the chat ask this, because I am big on positionless sports, positionless football, positionless soccer, positionless basketball. Be versatile, be able to play all over the place. And I think positionless hockey is just the same. If it is tantalizing to me for Luke Evangelista to be able to play with these two free agents, Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessalt. I don't know who is the center on that line. Stamkos has played it. Would you want to see those three together? I think it maximizes Luke Evangelista's development. And it is for him to be able to see the ice the way he does and set people up to have 2 40-goal scorers alongside of him. That would be real special if they could figure it out. I don't know if it's possible.
Yeah, I think it depends on what your priority is. If your priority is to have the best possible depth scoring, then you keep the top line the way it is, and you have Stamkos and Marchessalt with Evangelista, and it also helps Evangelista's development, like you said. If your goal is to put forth the best possible offense, then I feel like you have to find a way to get Stamkos and Forsberg on the same line. But I would lean against it a little bit just because we saw how good that top line was. I mean, they were a top 10-15 line last year in terms of generating offense, scoring chances, goals, all that stuff. Playing with 2 40-goal scorers is best case scenario for Luke Evangelista, especially playmakers like Stamkos and Marchessalt. So, I mean, that's what I would do. I think Stamkos is capable of playing center in this kind of offense, especially when he has wingers like Marchessalt and an Evangelista. I think that would work. That's what I would go with. I can't really make a case for doing anything else, although it is tempting having Forsberg and Stamkos on the same line. So if they go that way, I understand the reasoning for doing it, but I personally would keep the top line the way it is, because we saw that for most of the year last year that held up and they produced, and I wouldn't mess with that.
Yeah, I think like it is hard. Again, like Mike said, I would get it if you want to get Forsberg and Stamkos on the same line. Totally understand that. But right now, until you actually get them on the ice and see what you have. I mean, you know what you have individually, but see how they are together. I don't think you can really justify going in and breaking up the only line that was productive for you last year until like the new guys come in and give you a reason really to believe that like these different combinations are going to be better. I think personally the depth scoring is more of the issue that needs to be fixed here. So again, and a lot of people were saying this last year, Ryan O'Reilly is really not like meant to be a top line center, but he was the best center on this team, so that was his role. But then, okay, he still, we saw what he did alongside Philip Forsberg and Gus Nyquist. He played like a top line center. But then who's your second line center? Colton Sissons. We know we love Colton Sissons here, but he is not a second line center. So that's where I think you have the depth. The depth is the bigger piece because this needs to be more than just a one line team.
Well, and so again, is developing Tommy Novak as the second line center with Stamkos and Marchessalt on either side an incredible situation to put him in? Absolutely. But is that what he does? Is that where he should be? Is he better off on the wing on the third line? If you move Evangelista down to the third line, are you going to maximize his playmaking ability because you're playing him with Colton Sissons? I don't know why. I agree. I feel the need to clear my throat on Colton Sissons. We love Colton Sissons and everything he does on the team, but this is not a guy who drives offense. That's not his job. That's not what he's getting paid for. And Evangelista is going to drive offense. And Novak can at times drive offense, but we've seen that he needs to, as somebody said in the comments earlier, spend the offseason in the gym.
Yeah.
I honestly don't. He's got a lot of options, but there is still not a clear number 2 center on the team, even with all this money and all this spending. If they can figure out a way, again, this is where it's like, and I'm not a smart enough hockey schematic person, but I'm going to work on this in the summer to figure out, can you run an offense through a winger like Evangelista? And so while Stamkos is lined up as your center and playing center because he's got some history there, even though it hasn't been in a while, can you be center in sort of name only? And because you want him shooting the puck, you want Marchessalt shooting the puck, you want Evangelista driving the offense and creating plays. And so can you run the offense off the wing, through the wing? I'm not a smart enough hockey scheme person to be able to tell you that or not.
I think you can. I think it depends on the personnel you have there. I mean, that's kind of the point and why we're having this conversation. I think, to go back to Novak for a second, I think that Novak, we saw, this organization's investment in him with the contract extension last year. Clearly they want him to develop into, I don't know if it's like the number 2 center, but I'm sure that would be the goal. Like they want him to have a big role on this team. So that's why I think bringing in guys like Marchessalt and Stamkos is also an investment in the development of Tommy Novak, because if you get him with those guys who can really drive offense, that could just kind of open up his game to a new level. And I mean, I'm not saying it will for sure, but I think you have to try those different combinations and see what works, because even with Evangelista last year, we saw him like reach a new level. And we were saying this, man, imagine if he was playing on a line with guys that could really drive the offense and really get him the puck. I mean, look out, because and this is no disrespect to like a Mark Jankowski, for example, but again, Mark Jankowski does a lot of good things, but he does not drive offense.
Mark Jankowski is not offended that he is not Steven Stamkos. He's not offended by that.
Yes. And again, he does a lot of good things. He's a big dude and he's strong on the forecheck, but he is not a goal scorer. That's okay. And he's not an offense driver. But I think that, if you could get both Evangelista and Novak have the skill to be second line players.
Yes.
But I think you need them to develop that confidence to, like, if you want Novak driving the offense, he'll get there eventually if you develop him the right way. And I know he's developed skill wise, but I mean, if you develop his confidence, I agree, he needs to get a little bigger, a little stronger, but then you get him with guys like Marchessalt or Stamkos who can really kind of open up this new playmaking ability for him. Yeah. I think that will go a long way. So like I said, I think bringing in these guys, it also is an investment in Novak and Evangelista.
Agree.
Yeah, and one thing I'll just add too, if Tommy Novak isn't your second line center and he is on the third line, it's not the end of the world. You have really good playmakers in the top six. And I would argue, I mean, I was looking at some stats on Money Puck. Tommy Novak, some of his most productive time last year came when he was playing with Mark Jankowski on the third line. So if Novak is on the third line, it's not the end of the world. If that does happen, that's a good sign, because that means you have a loaded top six. You have plenty of offense coming from those top two lines to where the pressure is kind of off Novak to be the driver of offense. We talked about last year, he was a second line center, and I think the times when he was, the streaks where he wasn't noticeable and he wasn't scoring, we were probably a little bit harder on him because the expectations were a little bit higher. This takes that pressure off of him to be the driver of the offense on the second line. And I think that's a good thing for Tommy Novak's development. I don't think it'll be that way for the next 4 or 5 years, but he can do a year as a third line center playing with Jankowski and whoever you want to throw on there, Sissons, whatever. And then maybe next year he can or the year after that, he can step up and do a top six role. But yeah, either way, if he's on the third line, it's not necessarily a bad thing.
And if he's on the third line and or playing on the wing, that takes even more pressure off of him because he's not expected to really drive that offense. And we saw that last year. He played on the wing, same with Cody Glass, and that kind of elevated their game a little bit. And so maybe that's not your long-term plan for him, that you want him to play at center. But like Mike said, it's not the end of the world. It's actually a pretty good problem to have if Tommy Novak's on your third line.
Yeah, a million, or Evangelista for that matter. Is Evangelista being maximized on a third line with Mark Jankowski and Colton Sissons, or Cody Glass and Colton Sissons, whatever the combination is? Probably not. And that's ultimately my question: is who do you think? Because I think Tommy Novak is a better pure goal scorer than Luke Evangelista potentially. I don't know if I'm crazy at saying that, but I think he just is a better The question is who, with 240 goal scorers on either side of you or around you or next to you, who do you trust in critical situations to create offense and get those guys the puck in a position to score? And in my head, it's Luke Evangelista over Tommy Novak right now. Some of that's because we just saw Evangelista play very well in a very difficult situation in the playoffs and for a full season, and Tommy Novak has been hurt and didn't play well in the playoffs. So maybe that's recency bias in my own head. But I feel like Evangelista has the higher ceiling as a player and as a creator of offense for others. And if the goal is to put Marchessalt and Stamkos on the second line to score 70 goals this year, you need someone to create space for them and get them the puck in scoring situations. And it feels, am I right or wrong? Do you guys agree? I think Evangelista is better at that right now today. Absolutely, you guys are right. Novak could develop into that, and they clearly are invested in him. I'm willing to bet you they're just as invested in Evangelista, if not more, because he's done it so far, at least in the short term. I don't know. Am I crazy?
No, I agree. And I think Evangelista has the higher ceiling as the offensive producer, as the points producer, because he's an offense first guy. And we saw the last 15 games and even a little bit in the playoffs, he's a high volume shot creator. And I think that's the role he kind of stepped into at the end of the year and really felt comfortable with. This offense is going to be the best when Luke Evangelista is on the second line getting 5 or 6 shots on goal per game. That's going to happen more frequently playing with Stamkos and Marchessalt than it will if he's playing with Tommy Novak. And that's not a knock against Tommy Novak, but Tommy Novak isn't, like I said, he's not that driver of offense. He's more of a disperse the puck to your teammates and get out of their way kind of player than he is, I'm going to go drive to the net and score a goal. And I think Luke Evangelista's style of play is more conducive to being successful with guys like Marchessalt and Stamkos than it is playing with Novak.
Yeah, look, steady. I'm not going to read your whole name here, but Steady says Novak is a better skater and playmaker than Evangelista, and Evangelista is a better nut front guy. I kind of feel the opposite, but hey, everyone's entitled to their own opinions. With
Evangelista is the better playmaker than Novak is.
I agree. Preston says, with the signing of Skjei and Carrier, what's going to happen with Stastny? This transitions us right into the next contracts. I think people are. The one thing I think Preds fans are wrong about so far, it's only been a couple of days, is complaining about the Brady Skjei contract. I think this is the best contract of the whole group. I think this is the best deal of the whole group. I went back and watched every single one of his goals over the last 3 years. This guy is going to walk the puck in and score on his own from the defensive spot. And this is a guy you can play with Roman Josi on the top line, move Josi over to the right if you want. You can play him on the second line and create power play offense. He is the same price basically as Ryan McDonagh, but significantly younger and better. To me, this is one of the best deals of the entire signing. We could talk about Carrier and 33 years old, but like I think he's a dependable piece. They know who he is. They got him at a fairly cheap price point, under $4 million a year. And now your top six, Juuse, Carrier, Skjei, Fabro, Lauzon, Schenn, is largely set. So the question about Stastny, we'll get to that. But I want to know what you think about the two contracts first with Skjei and Carrier. Again, I think the Skjei contract is the best of the entire group. And what do you make of the pairings? What are they going to do with these guys? Because how do we hide Luke Skjei?
I think that, I'm not saying I necessarily agree 100% with this, but if I were to put money on it, I would say the pairings next season are going to be Juuse and Skjei, Lauzon, Carrier, and Stastny and Schenn. And I think now we could debate that all day.
$2.5 million guy just sitting on the bench.
I mean, I don't know. Like, look, I would much rather have Dante Fabro in the lineup than Luke Schenn, but I'm just saying based on what I think is more realistic, I think that is what's going to happen. To be honest with you, I like the Skjei contract as well. And I think that when people are saying, again, oh, it's an overpay, it's too much money, it's too much whatever. Again, that is your replacement for Ryan McDonagh. We were talking about this, that like McDonagh is going to be that's a big hole to fill. And, Stastny's going to come in, but he's not going to, he will take a spot on the roster, but he's not going to fill that role that McDonagh had. Well, here's Brady Skjei. I mean, he's big. He's 6'3", like 210 or something like that. He does have that. He has hovered right around the 40-point mark each of the last 3 seasons, either just under or just over. If you're like, you talked about Steven Stamkos single-handedly improving the power play, which I don't think is a stretch to say that he will. But if your top power play unit has Steven Stamkos and Roman Josi, and your second power play unit has Brady Skjei, like, I'm scared. If I'm an opposing penalty kill, like, that scares me. And so I think that it is an upgrade over McDonagh. It's like you got him, he's younger and he's better. And I think he's more disciplined defensively than McDonagh is. I think that he also is very clutch. I feel like, I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but I feel like so many of Brady Skjei's goals last year came when either like the Hurricanes were up by 1 or down by 1, or like it was a shorthanded goal or something like that. It just seems like he has that clutch factor. And I think that, but again, going back to the power play really quickly, I think that's how you have to look at this financial investment. Yes, it's on the blue line, like at 5-on-5, but he brings a ton of special teams upside as well, which is something that this team really needs.
Yeah, what I like about Skjei is he improves your power play, he improves your penalty kill, he improves the scoring from the blue line that I talked about a couple weeks ago that had been lacking the last couple of years. Like, Brady Skjei is an upgrade over Ryan McDonagh in pretty much all areas of the game except for the penalty kill. Ryan McDonagh was one of the best penalty killers, but Brady Skjei had the third most penalty kill minutes on Carolina last year, and I think that was one of the things that once McDonagh was traded was who's going to replace him, because he was your main guy on the PK, and you had Jeremy Lauzon, Alex Carrier, and I think though like they didn't play as much as McDonagh did shorthanded, but I think Skjei kind of can step in and fill that role as well. And even going to the Carrier thing, to me, I mean, no one expected him to be back, and then like the day of free agency or the night before free agency, it was out there that he was going to re-sign. To me, that was a byproduct of Trotz probably saw what was on the free agent market and wasn't really interested in paying the prices for them. I mean, a lot of the defensemen got overpaid. Not gonna lie. You could even argue Brady Skjei was probably overpaid. I still like the contract because you get what you pay for, basically. I'm okay with overpaying for a defenseman the caliber of Brady Skjei. Alex Carrier.
He is what a first line number 1 pairing defenseman costs you. Like, that's
exactly
what it costs.
He drives offense. He can score points. He can play with Roman Josi, and that will probably be a fantastic pairing. But he could also play with someone like, I hope this doesn't happen to him, but he could also play with someone like Luke Schenn, and he could probably cover up some of the deficiencies there. So, And with Carrier too, look, if I'm Barry Trotz and I know I got Brady Skjei in the bank and he's going to sign, would I rather bring back someone who was pretty successful playing on a pairing with Jeremy Lozon last year, or would I rather take my chances with someone who's coming into a new system? You don't know what you're going to get. It might look good on paper, but you don't know. You know Carrier and Lozon work because you had an entire season last year of seeing that it worked. So
Andrew Burnett was really high on Carrier as well. Like really liked him. And yeah, I totally agree. I think that it's, if you're looking at the market and saying like, all right, it's kind of similar to that proven commodity argument. Not that these other defensemen aren't proven commodities, but we're talking about proven commodity within this system, and you kind of know what you're going to get, and you can get them for under $4 million a year. That's why I think it makes sense. But I also think that that's why it didn't, it came just down to the wire with him.
Yeah. What it
also
does
too, locking up someone who's going to play on your second pair for $3.5 million a year. That's a pretty good steal of a deal right there.
Yeah, relative to the market for sure.
Yeah.
So what's interesting, and I went back and watched all of his goals like the last 3 years. He's going to get like 15 to 18 maybe on this unit. Power play is very good. He doesn't score a lot from the point at all. Like that's what's interesting about this. He doesn't score a lot from the point, but he will crash the net. He scored a couple of goals crashing the net. Very good skill around the net, but most of his stuff comes from the high slot when he walks it in and he creates space for himself, and he's got that little snapshot that is pretty nasty. It's pretty ruthless, and he will get right there above the circle, right there in the high slot, and that's where he scores almost all of his goals. And that's where a power play condenses the defense. He can walk it in, and he's great at that. So let me
something else about Skjei too before we move on. Among all defensemen last year, he was 7th in even strength offensive zone time percentage. He's someone that's going to be in the offensive zone, and he's going to be making plays.
This is the contract I think is the best of the deal. So that's my opinion. But quickly here, what it does, it's same thing with offense. It's slot, and we're going to be long today. It's the biggest couple of days in Predators offseason history, so bear with us. What's interesting is it just like on offense, it slots everybody better. Carrier is better being the 4th defenseman on the team than he is being the 3rd. Luke Evangelista and Tommy Novak are better as the 6th and 7th forwards on the team than they are the 4th and 5th forwards on the team. They are all slotted more appropriately into the depth chart where they're supposed to be to maximize their ability to perform. Here's the one thing I wrote down, and Lozon with Juuse also feels interesting to me, but maybe I'm wrong on that. Move Juuse over to the right, that the kind of the bigger physical guy with the speed. Like I could see that one being fascinating for them to play with. Ultimately, just like with the forward conversation, Andrew Burnett has a lot of options. And that's the end of this. Like, they have more options than they've ever had on offense. And on defense, they've got to figure out how the puzzle pieces fit together. And I think you're right. Juuse and Skjei on the top line would be pretty nasty. Can you spread out the other guys in the right area? Lozon and Carrier have familiarity. Could you play Skjei with Schenn or Skjei with Fabro? You could do that too. There's a lot of options for Andrew Burnett, just like with the offensive players as well. On the power play, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't it Josi Forsberg on the point with O'Reilly, Nyquist, and Evangelista, correct? Wasn't that the first power play unit? If you are now putting Stamkos on that unit, now you have Evangelista and Skjei and Marchessalt on the second unit. That's where you start to get very excited about the power play, is that you now have 7 or 8 guys who can score at any moment on a power play, and they're spread out over 2 lines. And that is cannot be overstated how important that was. And again, Carrier at $3.5 million, where he's not being asked to be the top guy. That's the most important part. He's now slotted where he is supposed to be, both from a cost perspective and from an expectations perspective.
And touching on that second power play unit really quickly, if Philip Tomasino makes the team, how much better is he going to be on the second power play unit playing with guys like Marchessalt and Brady Skjei? I mean, you're going to get more production out of a player like him if he makes the team. I'm not saying he will, but if he does.
Well, I agree. Here's what's interesting, and this is going back to the offensive lines. I got one question for you, because right now, Parssinen and Tomasino don't have options left, so if they make the big club, they kind of need to stay. But you basically have Cody Glass, Juuso Parssinen, and Tomasino for one spot. That's a depth benefit that they've never had before, because one of those 3 guys probably needs to take a starting spot. But otherwise, I mean, McCarron, Smith, Jankowski, Sissons, those guys already have Novak. They already have slots locked up. That's like 5 of the bottom 6 right there potentially. So I don't know who's the other guy. Who's the person that makes the team? I know it's July 3rd here. So
well, I'm also willing to bet one of those 3 guys is traded by the time training camp starts. My money is on Juuso Parssinen, but I mean, if Tomasino's still around, if he's done everything the coaching staff has said he has done, and he's taken this seriously, and he's looking at Andrew Burnett challenging him as opposed to just beating him down, then I think, he could potentially challenge for it. But I'd pencil in Parson right now, but I think one of those three is traded by the time training camp starts.
I would agree. I think if you're looking at the spot that's likely available in terms of like fourth line kind of, I think Parsonen's the best fit there, to be honest, especially now that Kiefer Sherwood's gone. I think that Parsonen makes the most sense there. And also I think that Cody Glass and Philip Tomasino both have higher trade value than Parsonen does right now.
Also agree.
So I would agree. I think one of those guys is going to be traded. I mean, Barry Trotz said he wasn't done making moves. He did not mention anyone by name, but I mean, he is now up very close against the cap. And so I think that he will be trying to offload one of those guys.
Somebody says replace McCarron with Parsonen, and if you want to go heavy offense, you in theory could go Glass or Tomasino on the wing with Parsonen and Smith, but I don't think that that's the line you want. I think McCarron and Smith showed us last year that they are excellent together, and I agree with you. Parsonen with those two feels like a more like for like Kiefer Sherwood switch, and maybe even more upside with Parsonen. So then if you've got Jankowski,
and that's the thing that with that, that's the thing that kind of sucks a little bit is Parsonen's a better fit for the line, but Tomasino and McCarron played really, really well together last year when they were paired together. So I don't think you can go wrong either way, but I think Parson's the better fit there.
It's good problem to have. One of them probably makes the starting lineup. Parsonen would be my guess. One of them is traded. Tomasino would be my guess. I don't know what happens to Cody Glass, but he can kind of play everywhere. So if he could develop himself into a valuable piece, no matter where the coaches want him, there's maybe a place for him on the team. Maybe he's the 13th forward on the team. I don't know, but we'll see. By the way, just quickly in terms of the numbers, Nyquist 3.18 off the books at the end of the year. Cody Glass 2.5 off the books at the end of the year if they want. Evangelista, of course, is going to get a new contract, I would assume, before the end of the year at some point for next year. He's due a major raise, and then Fabro $2.5 million. So there is some money coming off that $8.8 million in dead cap next year. Is going to be the one when UC's contract kicks in and all these other contracts kick in. I know the cap's going up, but that's a whole other $9 million forward the Preds could be playing with. So it's going to sting next year, but this year it's not as bad. It's only
imagine what Trotz does in 2026 when he's only got $3.5 million of dead cap.
Yeah, that's when everybody's basically off the books. But I think they've done pretty well. They've done pretty well because they have options at forward, they have options in the power play, they have options on the blue line, and they have options in net. I don't know what else you're supposed to do as a general manager.
They also have 2 first-round picks next year that they can, Trotz has said, like he's open to dealing them for proven players.
All right, so that brings us real quickly here to the draft, and obviously sort of their strategy here. We don't have to spend a ton of time on this. A lot of good coverage over on Lower Broad Hockey on this. They draft 6 forwards, and ultimately the beginning of this conversation is they drafted 8 players this year. They clearly did. They clearly love Andrew Gibson and Tanner Molendyk because they only drafted 1 defenseman, passed on a quality defense options twice, and then traded down with a third one, and then drafted a defenseman with the 77th pick, 6 forwards and a goalie. They're set up to trade Askarov if they want to. He clearly went after forward. You guys can comment on any one particular player if you want to, but ultimately they have all of their draft picks for next year. They have every single prospect still in the pipeline. They added Andrew Gibson and 8 more prospects in this process. So the next wave for Barry Trotz, he is setting himself up for whoever's around in 4 years, let's call it, to have a new wave of talent come in and take over, which includes all the guys that are currently in the farm system. So number one, doing this without trading all the assets. And then number 2, sort of your takeaway quickly on the draft class in general and maybe the strategies deployed in the draft. Are there guys you like more than others? What'd you think of what he did on the weekend before Monday's spending spree?
Yeah, I mean, I love everything that they did. Even going to the Andrew Gibson acquisition, he's 6'3", 200 pounds. Like, he's the big physical defenseman that I think Barry Trotz is looking for in the offseason. And he was someone they were targeting in the draft last year. So they had to pay to get him, unfortunately, because they could have, I think Alex Doherty tweeted out that Detroit kind of took him a pick before the Predators were on the clock. But I think he's someone that fits really well into what they're doing. Talk about Tanner Molendyk and all the stuff that we did, and Braden's got his man crush on Tanner Molendyk, and he's someone who I think is going to I think he's someone we could see rise through the ranks very quickly and get to the Predators very quickly. Whether that's a year, whether that's 6 months, I don't know the exact timeline, but I think he's someone who's going to be a fast riser. So you have two building block kind of players on defense. Then you go and you get Igor Søren and Teddy Stiga. I love the Teddy Stiga pick. That might have been the steal of the draft for me. He's someone who easily could have went top 20 in the first round. I mean, a lot of scouts had him ranked, in that, 20, 25 range. So the fact that they get him at 55 was a steal. He plays center, and everybody that you talk about, scouts, coaches, teammates, the word that comes up with Teddy Stiga is relentless. The Predators had that embroidered on hats and stuff last year. So, I mean, he fits the Andrew Burnett kind of offense to a T. Søren's the same thing. And I want to touch on one thing. A lot of people have said that they're comparing Søren and Leroux, and I get the temptation to do that. But Søren is more defensively responsible. He's more disciplined. He likes to hit people, but not at the expense of the team. Whereas Leroux has kind of gotten into some hot water because he loses his temper. He can be a little too aggressive. The difference between those...
he's not going to attack people in the stands,
Yeah, he's not going to do that, but he makes some boneheaded plays. Søren uses his aggression and his physicality to create turnovers, to win puck battles, to bait the defense into doing things that he wants to do to set up something else, to set up a better play. Leroux oftentimes will make a hit just for the sake of making a hit. He's more apt to getting under your skin just because he wants to be a pest. Søren uses all the stuff that he does, and especially his physicality, to try to set something up. So yes, they are comparable, but also they're very much different in the way that they approach the game too. So I like the Søren pick. I do think it was a little bit of a reach at 22, but if that's who they wanted, and he obviously fits what Andrew Burnett wants to do, and Barry Trotz loves the guy, so I don't think they could have done much better with the top two picks. Gustafsson, I think, was...
Stiga, by the way, 117 points in 88 games last year.
Yeah, he's a point producer. He is all over the place. He's got a high motor. He hits people. He scores, crashes the net. Like, he does pretty much everything you could want out of a potential future top six center. I like Gustafsson. I think he's a pretty solid addition. I think that Ryan Ufko is someone who's going to be a quick riser as well. So I like where they're at on defense, and then I think Miguel Marquez could end up being a pretty good player too. I think he was a little underrated, so I think he's someone that could rise as well. And I like adding Jacob Malata. They needed, especially if Askarov is traded, they need some more goaltender depth. So I think that was a good pick too.
Yeah, I agree. I also really, again, not technically the draft, but I really like the Andrew Gibson acquisition. I like him a lot. I got to talk to him at development camp yesterday. Really, really excited to see this kid and what he can do. And I think plus you have the added benefit of the fact that he is older. He's closer to being, being able to make an impact on this team. So, and Barry Trotz even said that the acquisition of Gibson took off the pressure to draft a defenseman this year. And so, which is why they only went with one. And so I think that was a really good move. And that was probably that, and the Teddy Stiga pick were probably my two favorite moves from the week.
Yeah, I agree. There's lots of value there with Stiga. Obviously, like you said, some upside, but maybe a little bit of a reach with in the first round. But then, of course, you throw a bunch of picks at center. You go get a third, basically what is now a third string goaltender for you. Your third goaltender behind, or I guess fourth if you're counting Wedgewood. And so then you add two. Like, I still would only call the Preds blue chip. If you're going to use the phrase blue chip prospects, I still think there's only two that are on defense in Molendyk and Gibson, but you've added Gibson to that list. Like, he's now a top 5 or 6 prospect in the farm system. This is, again, 42nd overall pick. You used a second rounder and another prospect. So really he's a second round pick, and a prospect to get him, and a first round pick on Molendyk. So you're invested in those two guys being the top of your blue line system. And I think that's fine. I think those two guys, both great skaters. They both can create some offense, lots of upside for both of them. So
you traded Jesse Kiskinen in a second round pick to get Gibson. So he was basically an extra second round pick for you this year.
Yeah. No, I think he was. I think it was an excellent move, and
I think he was better than any of the defensemen that were probably on the board when the Predators would have been drafting in the second round too. And he's already got a year of development, with the Red Wing system. So I think it was great, and we'll have a lot of stuff on prospects on Lower Broad Hockey. I'm working on a prospect almanac, so we'll have a prospect ranking, probably do 1 through 25. We'll have scouting reports, coaches, quotes, stuff like that. It's going to take me a little bit to build it out, but that will be coming. So if you are interested in prospect stuff, we'll have a ton of that stuff at Lower Broad Hockey sometime in the next month or so.
Look, if you are a Nashville sports fan, the Tennessee Titans have a brand new coach and just spent $290 million in free agency, and they have a new quarterback taking over. If you're a Preds fan, they just spent $185 million in free agency. The first-year head coach was successful, and they've got guys that have scored a combined 216 goals they signed. Stamkos and Marchessalt, 100 goals between each of them over the last 3 years. And these teams are going for it. Nashville SC just fired its coach. Like these guys are going for it. Professional sports in this town, you should be very excited about where they're at. I have no idea if it's going to work out for any of these teams in Nashville. But if you're a pro sports fan in this town, I can't remember a time where you should be more excited about the direction of the franchise for all of these teams. And I think that's a good time to be in Nashville and to be a fan. So the Preds, they saw what the Titans were doing and they said, look, we got to do this too. we got to do this too. And now I think expectations are elevated for all of them, and especially for Nashville from a hockey standpoint. So, all right. Anything else? I know we went a little long here today, but there's a lot to talk about. We still have lots of stuff coming for you. More analysis on draft picks and prospects, more analysis on the farm system, more analysis on the contract valuation. I'm going to have something up for you guys this week at Lower Broad Hockey. We're working on a Saros story as well. And I might have some guest appearances from some other folks as well. So just stay tuned. Lowerbroadhockey.com. You got the weekly newsletter from Emma coming out on Fridays. Looking forward to that. What else you guys got? Anything else you want to add? Parting shots here. Go to the Sphere if you're in Vegas. Go check it out. What else you guys got?
It's worth more than $5 to go to the Sphere.
I'd pay more than $5 to go to the Sphere, but not if U2 was playing.
Who would you pay the most amount of money to go see?
Me?
Yeah.
Gosh, I don't know.
No, the other person on the show that hates you too.
Are you asking how much would I pay or who would I pay to go
both.
see?
You could look. This is we're having fun here.
I think the most I've paid to go see someone was Eric Church at Bridgestone, and I paid $150 for my ticket.
That's a pretty penny for a ticket for a concert for a
they were really good seats.
Single person. $200 is like festival prices. Like I should get like 6 shows out of the deal for $200.
I mean, I was pretty close to the stage.
I would, yeah, good for you. I would go. I feel like Sturgill Simpson would put on an extremely psychedelic show at a venue like that. And I've seen some buddies send me videos of like the Dead and Company out there at the Sphere playing like wild, crazy shows. I had my noodle jam band phase back in college. But that was performance enhanced, and that's not really my thing anymore. So
I feel like a performance enhanced experience at the Sphere would be wild. Like I felt like I was tripping just being there. Like, and I took pictures of it, and I had people telling me like which way is up and which way is down. Like I can't understand this photo, and I'm like, imagine being there. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, you're out in the desert, maybe just get some peyote. They have peyote. Is peyote legal in Nevada? I don't know. No, I think Sturgill's got a new record coming out this year, and he's already done like weird stuff. He's always doing crazy, weird things. I think he would do a crazy show at probably some wild psychedelic show. I'm sure there's a gazillion other bands that would do great stuff. I'm sure Fish would be great out there. I'm sure there's lots of stuff, but it does feel like it caters to a particular type of music in the Sphere.
The Eagles are going to be there in November. So,
my friend Don Henley, yeah,
your close personal friend.
Yeah, I told you guys that story, right? I met him. My wife and I met Don Henley and his wife in London. We were just having dinner, and Don Henley. Did I tell you this? Did I not tell you this?
No.
Our first night in London, we were sitting down at a wonderful restaurant called Gymkhana. Definitely a free shout. Two Michelin star restaurant. If you're in London, go to Gymkhana. Best Indian food I've ever had in my life. We're sitting down at the bar downstairs, and I've got a hat on. I guess it had Nashville on the side. It's like a brewery here in town. And in Nashville, you don't bother celebrities when they're eating. We didn't even look over at them. My wife and I were both admiring how his wife had aged so gracefully, I think. And he just reaches over, puts his hand on my shoulder, and he's like, "Hey, you from Nashville?" And we just start chatting. We have a good conversation. And at the end of it, I was just like, "Oh, I'm Brady. Nice to meet you. This is my wife, Haley. It was nice talking to you. Enjoy your dinner." He goes, "Yeah, Don Henley. Nice to meet you." And I was like, "Wait, like," and I didn't say this out loud, but in my brain, I'm doing the whole like, "Wait, that Don Henley, like that Don, like taking it easy, that Don Henley." And absolutely, it was him. And perfectly lovely, huge fan of Nashville, huge fan of what we're doing here, and perfectly nice guy. And wanted to be my friend. Don Henley introduced himself to me with both names.
All right. Well, can he get
I'll get
us
you some
tickets to the Sphere? Yeah.
I'll text Don now. Just me and
Yeah.
Don. No.
Yeah.
I looked at after he walked away, I looked at my wife and I said, when's the last time you think he needed to use his last name in an introduction? Like, when do you think he was like Don Henley? And then the manager comes over to us and he's like, excuse me. I don't mean to interrupt, but who was that? And we were like, Don Henley. And they were still like, huh? Our bartender was Italian. He clearly did not listen to 80s rock. And he was like, no, my manager would like to know who that was. And I was like, Don Henley. He goes, what? I go, Eagles. And he's like, huh? I go, Hotel California. And he's like, oh, okay. It took him a while to get there. Once I said Hotel California, he got it. So, yeah. Okay. I'll get you guys some tickets. I'll text Don. We'll see what happens. All right. Lower Broad Hockey over on Substack. Subscribe. The chat room is on fire. We're going to have a great time. We got a lot of good stuff coming for you that you can't get anywhere else. You can catch all three of us over there as well. Get to Michael on Twitter at @MGSports_. You can get to Emma at Emma Lingen, of course, at Emma_Lingen, on Twitter, and of course on Facebook as well. You can get to me at Braden Gall, at Lower Broad Pucks on socials, and at 440 Sports. I think that's everything. Otherwise, rate, review, subscribe, share the show, thumbs up, tell everybody about the show. We do appreciate you guys, and get excited about the season. September can't get here fast enough. It's going to be a lot of fun, and you two will have great coverage of development camp and then training camp as well. So stay tuned. Don't go anywhere, folks. Otherwise, have a great week, and thank you all for listening.